The bases dropped on an afternoon power hour edition of Soccer Down here. John called it the power hour, and I don't know what your power hours typically have been. I've heard some bad things about power hours, and I'm just going to leave that to the side.
It's the power hour.
Okay, that'll work. It is going to be.
Wasn't there like a wrestling thing that did a power hour?
I'm sure there was. Sounds like an NWA thing from like 1986.
True.
It is going to be an hour of a show because it's a lot of stuff on a Friday. It's been a busy day so far. It's going to be busier later. We've got the run-up coming at 7 o'clock. Kelly Francis will get us ready for Atlanta and the New York Red Bulls. We'll be back in the morning for a more in-depth preview from the two of us as well. So all kinds of stuff going on to get you ready for Saturday night. We've got a bunch of news to catch up on as well. So where do you want to start, John?
You want to start with action from yesterday and work our way forward, or how do you want to do news today? We can go either way. A lot of folks are mad about the broadcast from last night. That's in the timeline too.
Let's leave this one out right now to start with. We're waiting for more information. The folks at The Athletic and ESPN has confirmed this as well, that there is a Sporting Kansas City player who has tested positive. I don't know if that's been confirmed via follow-up. They arrived on Sunday. If they tested positive today, or if they tested positive Thursday and then it was confirmed today, it is within that window of time that you worry about. And that was part of the concern about teams coming in later. Not remember hearing about any issues with Sporting Kansas City while they were training in market. So stay tuned. We will find out. I do think that it's, you have to remember nobody else has tested positive yet. The issues with Dallas and Nashville, players tested positive upon arrival, and then more players subsequently tested positive. This is one that's testing positive later in the whole process. You didn't have any initial positives. Now, as it's being reported, that player trained as the team all tested negative twice before getting on a charter. Once upon arrival, they were cleared to train. The player who has tested positive did train. That doesn't mean that everybody on the team is going to test positive. We have to wait and see. Yeah. But this is why you wanted more buffer time. You didn't get more buffer time. These are the issues that can come up. And Sporting Kansas City is scheduled to play on Sunday against Minnesota. So we'll be keeping an eye out for more information on this one. It's going to be a developing story. But stay tuned for updates on Sporting Kansas City. And if we hear any more while we're on, we'll let you know.
Yep, it is definitely part of the saved elements right now in the timeline as I'm chasing. So for those who are watching, if you see me tuck my head to the left, that's what I'm kind of keeping an eye on Twitch.
Yeah, welcome to working from home. It's just what it is. We've got screens everywhere trying to keep up with everything going on. So it's just part of the gig. I think you all get that by now. Thanks for finding us this afternoon, by the way, for those of you who have been hanging out waiting on us to show up. I blame Bill Gates and his badly timed Windows updates for, new laptop needed a lot of updating, I guess, which doesn't make much sense. But anyway, where do you want to start?
Okay. Chris Ashley is letting us know about a possible technical problem.
Ay, Dios mío. Also, I am learning that when, they want to have these updates, it changes all of your settings. It's good times. I will take care of that, Chris. Give me 1 second while John gets us started with some updates on wherever he wants to go.
Sure. A lot of stuff that is going on, and there was an article that popped up about an hour ago that has to do with Major League Soccer. It came from our friends at Sportico, and it says that byline is from Eben Novy-Williams and Scott Soshnick, that MLS nears a rule change to allow private equity ownership across teams. And so I, for the last hour or so, have been trying to go down Private Equity Fund 101 to try to have some kind of economic base as to what we're looking at here.
What does that mean?
I was trying to find out how private equity firms get their money and what private equity firms are and what they do and what this possibly could mean for Major League Soccer and doing a little background on that. But the rule change could be where MLS changes their ownership rules to allow investment funds to take minority stakes in clubs. And from the copy of the article, quoting directly, a move that should make it easier for teams to access cash at a time when revenue is down for all U.S. sports. MLS would join NHL and MLB as major U.S. leagues that allow private equity ownership.
Well, yeah, the part about bringing in cash right now, well, that's obvious. You'd be selling part of the club, so it's cash. It's about who can buy it, though. As John mentioned, the NHL and Major League Baseball allow private equity ownership. The NBA is exploring it. The NFL does not allow it currently. They are looking at some limitations, how much of a team can be owned through private equity. Let's see, what else? How many teams can be included in the portfolio? If I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong from your Cliff Notes versions of this, John.
Yeah.
Basically, the private equity firm is going to have a lot of different investors, and it is an investment. It is a group that is going to look at a team and say, yes, 20% of this team or 10% of this team is a good investment, and we will get a return on it for our investors, and that's how it'll work. Is that at all in the ballpark of?
Yes, where you have a private equity firm, and there are limited partners that go with this private equity firm, whether it's a pension fund, insurance companies, folks that are worth a lot of money, offices, endowments, foundations, sovereign wealth funds, that kind of stuff. It's an investment. They pull their dollars into an investment, put it into a private equity fund that can go in any different number of ways, and they can invest in whatever they want to, understanding that there's going to be a return in addition to a fee that goes to the equity firm itself, the general partners, for managing all of this money and coming up with these ideas.
Yeah, this is not all that new in the soccer world, as the article over at Sportico points out. You have Arctos Sports Partners, which is investing in major U.S. leagues and European soccer. You have Capital with a K football group that is doing a portfolio of soccer properties around the world. The NBA's creating its approach to deal with this. I would imagine they will be creating that a little faster right now because as the whole point of this is, it is increasing the number of people and increasing the opportunities for money to come into the league at a time when money needs to come into the league because there's not other revenues coming into the league. So this is something to keep an eye on. I think it's a smart move from the MLS perspective. The National Hockey League and Major League Baseball is already doing it. So it's not like it's completely out of the box here. It's a pretty simple idea. You do have to have those checks and balances. You don't want a large component of a team being owned in this manner. You'd like to have local ownership and an individual or individuals who are responsible for the team's activities. But this is a way to bring in some money quickly, and that's important. That's a very important aspect of what's going on. I highly recommend Henry Bushnell's article over at Yahoo Sports about the Adidas logo. It's a reality of where sports is right now. You need revenue, or you need to keep revenue that you don't want to give back, and you're going to have to do some things that are abnormal. I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah.
If Adidas says we paid, I don't know, $150 million over 10 years, I think it's somewhere in that ballpark. If we're giving you $15 million a year, and because we're not going to get every regular season game we're supposed to with all of that exposure for our kits and our equipment, and we're not going to have people in the stands to seat up close, well, we're going to need 50% of that back, or 40% of that back, or 30% of that back. Well, how about if we put this giant logo superimposed at midfield for all of these games in this tournament? What does that get us?
Yeah.
That's where you are at right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of all this. So that's where you're at. That's sports. That's sports. I hope you guys are paying attention to what's going on in college football. College football's finally caught up to the rest of the world in this conversation. Can't just act like nothing's happening. And you're seeing now conferences say we're not going to play these non-conference games. Why? Money. Straight up, money. And I think the angle that nobody's talked about in this, it's like, okay, they're not going to play the non-conference games, and they can't draw the line easily to say, well, we're going to play this one, but we're not going to play this one over here where we're supposed to cut a check for $750,000 to a team coming into our building to get beat. We can't pick and choose, so we're not going to play any non-conference games. We're going to shorten the schedule, reportedly shorten the travel, although some conferences that doesn't mean anything. It's all about money. Yeah. It is all about money. And even major college football programs are feeling that pinch. MLS is, USL will be, NWSL is. Things are going to be different for a little while. I don't know what little while is. I don't know if it's a year. I don't know if it's 2 years. I don't know if it's 6 months. I don't know if it's a year and a half. I have no idea. But don't judge moves from leagues and teams based off what worked 5 years ago, because that's not relevant anymore, and that's the difficult thing that we're in right now. You have to be able to adapt, and I think leagues who are able to do that are going to be the ones who get through this the best. Clubs who adapt and find new ways to engage, connect with their fans, connect with their media, connect in general, they're going to be the ones who handle this better. And that's just where we're at. This possibility with different kind of ownership coming into the league, that increases the amount of money these clubs have to operate and continue to operate, and that's very important right now.
You mentioned the non-conference games in college football. The money involved, if I remember correctly, $22 million that would have been paid to those teams that were going to those Power 5 schools to get that paycheck. So $22 million is no longer a part of the kitty when it comes to the football season.
Okay, I think the audio has worked itself out. I changed my setup for audio coming in. I'm learning all about this on the fly, y'all. And one thing I learned is when this updated, it changed things. But even this happened one other time where I had to add a separate input for my microphone, separate from the video component. Usually it doesn't. This time, some reason it did. So sorry about the issues early on. Hopefully it'll be okay for the rest of the way. Adam from 816, bad news for Sporting Kansas City. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. That's the reporting right now. I think, and I've seen it written different ways, and this is what's so confusing about this stuff. I think the player who tested positive has been retested and still tested positive. Yeah. Now, there's been multiple occasions in the bubble where you've had a positive test and then you had a negative test afterwards multiple times and the player's cleared. That just happened with the New York Red Bulls. Happened with Minnesota United. I think in this case, the follow-up has been done. I've at least seen it reported that way a couple of times.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's no way to know yet. I think there's a lot of assumptions being made at the moment. We just have to wait and see. This stuff is the great unknown with all of it. We're all figuring out how this works, and we don't know the player who tested positive, if they sat down at the same dinner table with somebody, or if they played video games in a room with somebody, or if they didn't really interact with anybody and they trained, but they didn't put anybody else at significant risk. We don't know these things yet. So let's wait and see what else we get. I'm sure there's going to be enhanced testing, follow-up testing, everything possible on Sporting Kansas City. Adam from 816 said that from Honduras, Roger Espinoza was pulled from media days. This is from Honduran media. I'm assuming Diaz. It says it might be him. It could be. It might not be. It could just be something else. That's the stuff with this. It's really easy to jump to conclusions, and you don't want to, because we're only getting really small pieces of information at a time, and it's tough. It's very difficult. We'll have to wait and see with Sporting Kansas City. They do play on Sunday, and if there's any risk there, they would push it back. I mean, we've already seen that happen. I would imagine that would be the case here, but you do have follow-up testing and follow-up testing to do. And I did see one question I wanted to address a little bit here, not to us directly, but somebody was asking, what about all the false positives in the bubble? There's been a lot of false positives in the bubble. Are they not doing the testing properly or whatever? There's false positives everywhere, y'all. That's nothing to do with this testing. Testing is testing. And depending on the type of testing, you're seeing false positives, whether you're going to take one, I'm going to take one, a player's going to take one. We saw it in Major League Baseball. We've seen it in college. We've seen it in other leagues. It's just part of the process. That's why MLS is doing a lot of testing, because you're trying to minimize the false results, whether it's a false positive or a false negative. You're trying to minimize that. So, again, don't jump to a conclusion because they've had false positives. Well, so did Major League Baseball. I mean, it's the realities of testing. And it's one of the major frustrations for me in all of this is that this is not the first time this has happened with an outbreak in the last few months, and we're pretty much in the same position with testing that we were before. That's an embarrassment, and that's a huge problem for anybody trying to do anything right now, let alone professional sports. So that needs to get corrected, and I really hope and cross my fingers that people will stop arguing about things on Twitter and actually do their jobs. Just a thought.
Yeah. We had action last night that we haven't had the chance to get into, and some folks on the timeline commenting on it.
What do we got? It was a good
Joey
game last
Logan.
night. Gustavo Bo with a good goal.
Yes, and Matt Turner at the end.
Oh, what a save.
Joey Logan really impressed with New England last night. Dark horse for sure, could maybe reach a semifinal. Montreal were so woeful going forward, no point man in quotation marks to find.
Yeah, Montreal's weird because Maxi Urruti was really poor last season in terms of getting goals. I like Maxi's game a lot. He's an incredibly hard-working player. I don't know if he is a true number 9. I think maybe a second forward or a wide player in a front 3 is where he's best suited. Or if you have somebody else in that team that is a goal getter, and Montreal hasn't had that significantly. He got off to a hot start this season, but yeah, that looked more like last year's Montreal. Montreal didn't make it easy for New England. I'm not worried about Montreal at this point. Thierry Henry got off to a very good start. I think they do need some upgrades on their roster, but my questions about Thierry Henry, they're off to the side for now. He's got time, and he's going to get time, and we'll see how they can develop. New England is good. I want to see a team that puts New England under pressure, though. I still have questions about them defensively. I still have questions on how they're going to replace Luis Caicedo in the holding midfield. You're leaning on a rookie a lot at center back. Kessler came on as a sub last night for Mancian. You don't have, until you get Polster into this team, you don't really have, I think, solid outside backs. I think they can concede some goals in this event, and I think they can concede some goals this season. But going forward, they're incredibly good. Carlos Heel, when he's on, he's one of the most talented players in the league. Gustavo Bo is completely unpredictable. Want to see more of Buxa. Christian Penilla is as fast as anybody in the league. It's a really good front 4. I just don't know about the back 6 of it until we see them tested a little bit more.
Tafka fired up this morning and this afternoon.
Oh, boy.
On various fronts. Tafka applauds ESPN with the efforts to try new things with both sound and video. But I favor crowd noise. I can't hear enough from the players to really enhance my experience. It feels more youth tournament without the ambient noise. From a subliminal level, the crowd noise added to the Tudane broadcast last night made that match feel more professional, in quotation marks. I'm not blaming anyone for anything, but I've been indifferent to the noise or no noise debate. I'm off the fence and picking a side. Give me fake noise.
You won't get fake noise from us tomorrow. That's all I can tell you. I don't like it. It's just me. It's a taste thing. It's not a right or a wrong answer here. I disagree about the professional aspect of it. I don't know if that's the word I would use because it's not real. It's not real noise.
The production choice?
No, I'm not asking for the right word. I'm just saying, like, it's not a professional or amateur thing to me at all. look, I don't. I think it feels even more out of place in a venue like the MLS's back tournaments being played in, where you can see superimposed people on the stands like they do in Spain or even like they do in Mexico, where it's like Zoom screens all over the place.
Right.
It works a little bit better for me just mentally. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I see people or see something that looks like people there. When it's not even a stadium, it feels really fake. And I actually liked it less with the 2-day NA or Twitter stream, if you were watching it there, that they pumped it in on the English language. They did not pump it in on the Spanish language, which I thought was a strange decision, but whatever. I just don't like it. It's just my opinion. I want it to be as real as possible. I disagree that you're not getting enough from the players. I think what it's going to take is a little more time for the producers to, I think, get a better feel for when they're going to get things from the players. Because I'm sure they're going up and down. They're riding this stuff pretty hard. Corner kicks, pump the thing up because I want to hear what the goalkeepers are saying. Set pieces, pump the noise up on that mic in that area because I want to hear what's being said about setting the wall, stuff like that. In general, I love hearing the tackles. I love hearing some other elements of the game that we don't generally get to hear in a stadium. I think it's been a positive, but that's just me. It's pretty split, honestly. It's about 50-50 depending on who you talk to. So Tosca's not in the minority here. There's plenty of people who want the fake crowd noise. I'm just on the other side of it, and it's just personal taste.
Yeah, and for me, because I've spent so much time at practices and sporting events, I like to hear the communication. I like to hear the sounds that are involved with the engagement of the game that you're watching or the game's in front of you. So I like to hear the conversations, and I know I'd like to hear more of those. The natural sound of the event itself is where I am in all of this. I understand the idea of having the artificial crowd noise underneath because, once again, it's a point we've made here on the show. The Bundesliga did it right. Mm-hmm. Having that crowd noise underneath you, and it's there. It's not overbearing. Once they figured out the mix after a couple of match weeks, but it wasn't overbearing, and it was integrated well to where if you weren't watching the game, it just sounded like noise in the room as the game and the play-by-play are going on there with you. So.
No, the Bundesliga was even better than that. The Bundesliga felt right, and a lot of it was the mix. The game you're thinking of that didn't feel right was the first one, and it was because of it didn't have any crowd noise, and it was echoey. I thought that the Bundesliga got the mix right. It's not about being just low in the background. It was when there was a reaction to something, it was correct. It was the right reaction.
It was on time. It wasn't 3 seconds late like we've had.
It wasn't 3 seconds late, and it wasn't jarring. It wasn't one of these situations where it's like low crowd noise, just ambient noise in the background, and then something happens, and then there's a couple seconds, and then it's that. Because that's what some of the Premier League games have felt like. Yeah. It's just delayed reactions and then no blending. Not like you'd hear a normal crowd. It's just, I don't know. That's just, it's my personal taste. Some of the comments on Twitch about it, Chris Ashley did not like it. Capital hated it. I did not. No, I was not on for the beginning of the broadcast. I had it down. I was doing a couple interviews, and so they went 15 minutes without it. Then they added it in way too loud. Then they brought it down pretty low, and it was okay later. It wasn't my favorite. A lot of people not digging the 2-day NA broadcast, and I'm assuming the English language broadcast. I thought it was actually better last night. Maybe that's just me. I do think, were they on site last night? Or was it just Nico that was on site on the Spanish side?
Don't know, but all I've seen so far with all of their coverage has been Nico.
Yeah, I know. Well, he wasn't the only one calling the game in English and Spanish. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Nico was there, and he's been great in coverage. I do like his work a lot. I know Ramsey Sandoval was calling it in Spanish. I don't know who was with him last night. I'm assuming that Nico contributed on the Spanish side because I don't remember him being involved on the English side at all yesterday. I think my frustration with some of their previous broadcasts was it felt thrown together. It didn't feel that way last night to me. You can like their style as a commentator or dislike it. We all have people we like and dislike, but they felt prepared. It didn't feel unprepared to me last night, and that's the thing that I appreciated the difference. That started honestly late last season, where it felt like they started putting more, maybe just time, maybe more resources, I don't know, more of a commitment to the English language side. Got to remember, they're a Spanish language network. Yeah. The English language coverage is completely, additional for them. And, it's not their specialty, and that's okay. I like a lot of natural Spanish speakers when they call a game in English. Yep. There's some that it's a tougher transition. I couldn't call a game in Spanish, so I don't really have much to say. You don't want to hear me on the Spanish language feed. They would be really hating my style. So it's hard. I know the biggest issue last night was there was some problem with the Twitter feed at the end of the match. I was not watching it on the Twitter feed. I was watching on Uverse and saw the Matt Turner save, and I guess some people watching online did not see the Matt Turner save because it cut out with a few minutes left, or it stalled or something. I don't know what the issue was.
Ramses and Diego Bellotto were at 2-NA. Nico was on site.
Okay, so they had the sideline on site. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I kind of wondered just the way they might be doing it. So Fox, I know, will not be on site, and we know ESPN has not been on site. So Stefano Fusaro is on site for sideline. I don't know if Fox will have anything like that in their broadcast because I have not seen a Fox reporter in the bubble yet.
Right.
So I'm assuming they will not have that as part of their broadcast tomorrow night.
Tafka said that he's come to the conclusion that the Garber vitriol is based on hatred for single entity with a shrugged shoulders emoji.
Okay, that was a whiplash. I thought there was a little bit more to set that up. Okay.
No, he's still going.
No, I know. That's a completely different change of topic there. Yeah. I wasn't ready for that.
He's on a full chain.
Okay.
Without single entity, MLS would likely have lost 6+ clubs due to COVID-19. It's a major safety net.
It's a major safety net. The 6+ is speculation. I don't know. Luckily, we won't know, and that's a help. I don't think MLS would be where it is, period, without single entity. I think it's what convinced people to buy in at the beginning because it protected their investment more than the other way. And look, the people who argue against single entity, go back, put in the research. It's something that I've been studying a little bit over this time where we haven't had much else to do, of how things went after the North American Soccer League failed, and it failed. It went out of business. They were down to 4 teams, and only one of them, going into the 1985 season, was able to put up the letter of credit to participate. So it went on hiatus, and it never came back. From 1985, when it went on hiatus, until 1996, when MLS played its first game. It's a long time that if people wanted to start a league and do it in the way of starting a club and growing it and doing all that, well, there was a lot of runway to do that. And you had the American Professional Soccer League that you had the American Soccer League first, and then you had the Western Soccer Alliance on the West Coast, and they played separately but then started playing a championship game, and then they merged into the American Professional Soccer League that later became the A-League. And you had, when the World Cup was awarded in 1988 for 1994, one of the conversations was about starting a new professional league. Much later in the process, it was said that it was a mandate by FIFA to start a new league. Early on, it was said that it was not a mandate. It was just part of the process that U.S. Soccer wanted to do. Well, the president at the time, Werner Fricker, didn't get anywhere with it. And he wanted to follow that model. And what he wanted to do was have local teams, mostly amateur teams at the time, probably some semi-pro teams mixed into that, come together with the APSL teams and start a league and grow it that way. Nothing happened. The opportunity was there. Nothing happened. When the sanctioning came up after Fricker was ousted from being president, Alan Rothenberg took over. Rothenberg presented the idea for Major League Soccer. You had the APSL, and you had another wild, crazy thing called League One America that wasn't even normal soccer. It was bizarre. They all applied, and the APSL at that time had 8 teams, I think, when they applied. And if you go back and read the conversations after MLS got that sanctioning, a lot of people said, you can't do this, you can't do a league this way. There was everybody down on single entity. The negativity in American soccer writers has been there even before MLS, so it's not new. But everybody said you can't do this. Everybody said you won't get people to invest. They did. Everybody said, well, the APSL is real soccer, and they're going to be the ones that are the first division, and MLS is going to have to merge with them to make any of this work. Well, going into the 1995 season, when MLS pushed their start back an extra year, going into the 95 season, the APSL lost 3 teams in that offseason, and they started with 6. And one of them lost its owner, the Atlanta Ruckus, lost its owner in March. Season started in May. And the New York Centaurs were pretty much a joke in terms of how much money they had to work with. So you had these opportunities for it to go a different way. Nothing happened. So the way of going single entity as a protection of an investment, because it was understood that this is going to be a long-term investment. And it was the only time that doing professional soccer in this country has been presented that way. That attracted Lamar Hunt. That attracted Robert Kraft. That attracted Phil Anschutz. That attracted some heavy hitters. Not a ton, but enough to get the ball rolling. It attracted sponsors. It attracted people who knew that the league wasn't going to be a fly-by-night operation, and when things got difficult, that it would just shut up shop and go away. And it hasn't. And that structure has served it really well right now in a time like this. But I don't think MLS is anything like this if you don't have the single entity structure. Garber wasn't there when that started, but people want to pin anything possible on Garber. He's not a soccer guy. That's a typical complaint from soccer people. He didn't grow up in the game. It was the same thing with Alan Rothenberg when he became president of U.S. Soccer. I don't think it makes much of a difference. I think from a business perspective, Don Garber has done as good of a job as any commissioner in American sports. He's grown this league into something that it never has been before. The North American Soccer League was never in this position that MLS is in right now. There hasn't been another league as big as the North American Soccer League, so what MLS has done is pretty special. And I don't think it's going anywhere, in large part due to its structure. And if people have a problem with that, they're going to have a problem with anything that happens. So I don't know. It's just, you try to get down to the bottom of it, and it's just there's been a negative vibe from our own soccer people about American soccer for a long time, and it's very frustrating, but it's not going anywhere because it's been there for generations.
Breaking news sounder, please.
You could have just waved at me. I was just rambling. It happens sometimes.
I don't want to break up your sentence and your flow.
I'm just rambling. What do we have?
Atlanta United today announced it has expanded partnerships with both Truist and Napa Auto Parts to be included on the team's kit for the upcoming MLS is Back tournament. Truist will be featured on the left sleeve for both the MLS is Back tournament and the remainder of the 2020 season. Napa Auto Parts will be on the back of the kit's shorts for the MLS is Back tournament only. American Family Insurance will continue to be the main kit sponsor across the front, while Piedmont Healthcare will continue to be featured on the right sleeve. Quote from Darren Eales follows in the press release. So there's okay. It's stock press release. We're grateful that Major League Soccer has allowed for additional sponsorship opportunities for the upcoming MLS is Back tournament in italics. And most importantly, we want to thank both Truist and Napa Auto Parts for their continued commitment to the club. We were one of the few teams in MLS to introduce a sleeve partner prior to the 2020 season, and we're excited to be one of 4 MLS teams highlighting 2 additional partners while in Orlando, end quote.
It's all about the Benjamins, and it's all about continuing these relationships with people who are giving you Benjamins and finding a way to make it good for them because they signed up for one thing and the league season is not that now. So good way to figure this out. It's just you have to get creative, and yeah, MLS open up the possibilities for the other sleeve and the shorts is a good thing in these situations because it can keep your sponsor relationships solid, and that's needed.
And if you're interested in seeing what they look like, Atlanta United's Twitter account is showing how it's going to show up. They've released some photographs as well. Josh Bailey with a point of parliamentary procedure for you, sir.
Okay.
He says, I know I've been silent, but if you want me to start an hashtag SDH Never Left prediction tournament for MLS is back, I'm game, or we could just pick up where we left off.
Well, I mean, technically, this would pick up where we left off because these are regular season games, but they would also double as Copa Especial games as well because it's a separate competition. They count for both, so we'll count them for both. So we'll have a Copa Especial, which is the CONCACAF games. Doesn't look like we're going to have any Open Cup, but who knows? And the MLS's back tournament games, and then just the whole regular season. So we're going to make those predictions tomorrow. We're going to do a short show in the morning. We're going to do an hour show, game day morning, to give you all of that because this week's been nuts. So
yes.
10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll do an hour, and we'll give you our predictions then. So you got a little bit of time to think about it.
Ellen Reynolds is in with the question that we posed yesterday about who the new smack talker will be for Atlanta United. Mm-hmm. And her thought is the new smack talker would be Escobar with a grinning emoji to follow.
Yeah, that name's come up. I could see it. I can absolutely see it. He'll be smack talking the forwards for sure. That's what he does. He'll be smack talking referees probably. I hope the dump button is ready to go tomorrow just in case. But you know, that's he plays best that way, and you don't want to take that passion out of it. So I'm good with it.
I think we are caught up on the Twitter, sir. What's going on Twitch?
Lots of different stuff. JP Vita said, does the Zoom participation add anything to the overall presentation? The screens don't even exist, so the players can't see the fans, and we really can't see them well on the broadcast. The players can only see them behind the goals. That's where I've seen it. It's been minimal from the MLS perspective. What the broadcasts in Mexico have done is very different. It's basically replacing the lower level of the stands in the stadiums they're using. You don't really have that possibility as well here, so I mean, I don't know what the Zoom presentation does for the people who are involved in it, other than just it's a way to basically have like a conference call with fans, which is cool. But in terms of the game presentation, I don't know exactly how that comes across in Orlando. I don't know how it comes across to the players and the teams. But I'll see it occasionally in some of the shots on the broadcast. It'll show up a little bit.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm still monitoring any other breaking news out of Orlando. Nothing has popped up additionally yet.
I missed that because there's a bunch. Let me keep going. There's a bunch on the 2-day NA stuff. I missed that they had the wrong format. That's not good. It's been confusing with all the groups and all that. So I really want to give the benefit of the doubt on that because I want it to get better. I love their commitment in general to the game. I love their commitment to the U.S. men's national team because a lot of times at training sessions and some of these camps, Nico Cantor's the only person there. There's not anybody from ESPN or Fox there. So I love that 2-day NA is engaging with an English language audience, and I hope they continue to do it. So I want it to be better, obviously, but yeah, I don't want to get nitpicky on things. I want it to continue to get better because they're not looking, and some of the things they've said, they're not looking at themselves as strictly a Spanish language broadcaster anymore. They're looking at themselves as a leader in soccer. And if that's in Spanish and some English, so be it. I do hope they come up with more things on the English language side and find a little bit more of a niche there, and that'll help. It'll help them in terms of just continuity and doing these games and all of that. More things on the Twitch. ATL Leone says, I'd like to just hear your thoughts on both New England and Montreal. Thought the better team of the match won. I'll agree with that for sure. I think Montreal was disappointing. I have some higher expectations for Montreal based off what we saw earlier this year. Didn't look like that team at all. Thierry Henry talked about their fight and just the intensity wasn't there, and I'll agree with that because the rustiness is going to be there no matter what. This is your first game in a long time. There's going to be bad passes. There's going to be poor touches. There's going to be things that are outside of your control. You just have to get to playing games. But the intensity has generally been there, and when it's not, it shows. New England had it. Montreal didn't have it enough. They still almost got a result, but it's a great goal from Gustavo Bo. Carlos Heel created 12 chances last night, which is obscene, and the fact that they only got one goal out of that is even maybe more obscene, and he might want to smack some of his strikers around a little bit because you create 12 chances, you expect a few more assists. Mm-hmm. New England, and like I said earlier, my question about New England is, does their defense hold up against top teams in this league? Because I'm not convinced that it does. And until we see them maybe against Toronto in this group stage, maybe against DC. I mean, DC's got a good attack. DC is, I think, kind of a mixed collection of parts at the moment. It's not all fitting together yet. But Toronto and DC are better attack-wise than Montreal, and I want to see how New England handles that. So they were the better team. I'm not convinced they're a contender yet, but if they get results against DC and Toronto and win the group, yeah, I think they move into that group with Philadelphia and then Atlanta and Toronto.
Yeah, for me, and I'm coming into the tournament, I was drawn to the coaches that have that World Cup group stage experience. Those were the ones that I gravitated toward as, okay, they've been through these situations either as players, coaches, or both, and that they could figure out how to navigate this sprint to get into the knockout stage. And so, initially Montreal for me was one of those teams that I was looking at in addition to New England because of what we know about Bruce Arena. So I'm still looking at Montreal to find a way. It's obviously a little bit more difficult after what happened yesterday, but they still I still am thinking that something could happen with Montreal in that wild card idea.
We got about 15 more minutes, so any questions? These kind of turn into Q&As, which is cool. So throw your questions in on Twitch, throw them in on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Adam from 816 with a really good question. Clark Hunt also owns the Kansas City Chiefs. We know about FC Dallas as well, and he just spent a lot of cash on Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. And Adam asks, should he be doing more? It's tough to compare the two for me because you're talking about two different worlds. Ultimately, that money on Mahomes, how much was guaranteed of that? Do you remember?
Efforting.
Rough. Okay, never mind. I shouldn't ever ask because you're going to start digging and it's going to take you 5 minutes.
No, it's not. Flock me.
No, because I don't want to sit here and do that.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
141 and a half.
Okay, so that's not even that much. I thought it was going to be more than that. Thanks, YouTube. I think YouTube was equal with you. No, YouTube at 35 on Twitch. And some of you, and Ricky Ricardo, you've identified yourself. I appreciate that. Some of you have your Twitch names, and I don't want to out you if you're under alias on Twitch. So until you give me permission, I'm just going to call you by your Twitch name.
Aliases. Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes. Oh, that's an injury guarantee. There's more. Okay. Anyway, let's say it's $300 million over 10 years, and didn't he already have a couple of years left? Uh-huh. So you add it on. So he's under contract for a long time. a lot of people looked at that as a team-friendly deal. So he's spending a lot, but it's not crazy for a quarterback, et cetera. Yeah, 12 years total. Okay, I remembered it correctly. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can compare that to what he does with FC Dallas. The Kansas City Chiefs bring in a whole lot more money than FC Dallas. There's just no way around it. FC Dallas has committed themselves to, instead of spending a lot of money on transfers, they're going to put that money into an academy. And they have spent a lot of money on their academy. And they continue to spend a lot of money on their academy. I think more than anybody else in the league. If not, it's in that, upper echelon of spending on the academy, which is a little bit different approach in that you're not spending. Eric Lopez as an example. If that ends up being $5 million, if you get the add-ons and whatever's been reported on it, Dallas will spend $5 million on. That's probably going to get you some of the numbers I've seen on their academy spending. Let's say 4 teams of 20 players or so each, so 80 players to try to develop. Are you going to get an Eric Lopez out of that? Don't know. We haven't seen Eric Lopez here yet, so we don't know. Are you going to get a Alphonso Davies out of that? Maybe. Are you going to get a Chris Edwards out of that? Well, you would have loved to have had him under contract before he left. Weston McKennie, same thing. Now you've got North Texas SC that allows you to sign more guys and play them. So that's another investment. I don't think you can compare the dollars straight away and say he's spending it in the NFL, he should be spending it in MLS. I think he's spending good money in MLS, but very differently than some other teams. He's not going out and spending a lot on transfers, although that's picking up a little bit. They're invested in developing talent, and I appreciate it. I mean, McKinney, Richards, Kellen Acosta, all the young guys they have coming through now. Ricardo Pepi is one to keep an eye on. Reggie Cannon is going to be another one to keep an eye on. He'll be in Europe here soon. You've got a ton of talent that they're producing. I'm good with the approach that they have. I think the next step, and I thought the way it was mentioned was maybe a little unfair for Philadelphia yesterday, but it's the same idea. Philadelphia in the match, John Champion and Taylor Twellman were talking about it, and Taylor said that the next step for Philadelphia is now to sell some of the young talent they've developed. Now, Dallas has done that, and they've brought in a return on it. I think the next step for both of them is to win first. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't understand who you are. When the time comes to sell Mark McKenzie, when the time comes to sell Brendan Aronson, you have to do it. But you have to build a team that can win with them now as well. Now, you don't hold them back because you're trying to win and you lose the opportunity to sell them for the right price. It's got to be in balance. But you also don't say that everything's good if you just sell talent. You've got to win. Dallas has got a supporter shield under their belts in 2016, which isn't that long ago. They got an Open Cup then, too. You got Luchi Gonzalez in now. I think he showed development in his first year last year. This year's kind of a crazy one, and it's a wash, so it's hard to compare. You want to see what they do next year. They need to be top half of the playoff teams in the West. That's where they need to get to. If they're going to develop that kind of talent, it's got to be talent that's good enough to win. Philadelphia right now. And maybe it's for Philadelphia, it's a little more win now because Aronson's going to be in Europe, I think. McKenzie will definitely be in Europe, and Twellman talked about Celtic being interested. They're going to go, and you're going to have the next ones ready, but they're going to go, and you'd like to win with them now. The winning can't be put into a box over here because you're a developing talent kind of club. You've got to develop the talent to win. Miguel Almiron, prime example. Miguel Almiron was brought here to get him ready to sell, to bring in as much money as possible, but also win. And you did both. That should be the goal. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. I want to see Hunt continue to invest on that. Part of it's going to be stuff like North Texas, where a Ricardo Pepi in the past wouldn't have had anywhere to play. He got a lot of good time with North Texas, and he got an MLS goal this year already. So that's vital, and that doesn't come cheap either. So I'm okay with it. You want to see him bring in the money to be able to add on top. Go out and get that really smart $2 million transfer. Go get that guy on a free that's a really good addition. Stuff like that, because they're not going to go spend $15 million on a transfer. That's not who Dallas is.
Yeah, for me, when I look at investment, it can come three different directions for me. You know, if you choose to invest in that expensive 7 or 8 figure talent to the left of the decimal place, you're investing that way. There's investment, like you're saying, the $1 to $2 million player that can come in and be that mid-range. And then the investment from academy to build, like we're seeing with North Texas. So I think that, yes, it's a delicate balance. But when I think of the term investment, I think that if you have your identity, it can come any one of 3 different ways. And it's just continuing to progress in whichever direction you've brought that individual in. But to your point, I think that it's also win and not think of other things. It's like, okay, sell on is great if you can get there with the talent that you bring from that third level. Third level, you sell them on and you make your profit, you reinvest. But I think that winning with those folks that you've developed to prove to the international theater that we're developing players the right way, you can come to us and get talent if you're looking for those kinds of things. That, for me, is what I'm looking for.
You're overlapping a couple of things. I want to make my point clear on this, at least. If you're going to invest in developing talent, you have to do it right. You have to develop talent that you can sell.
Yeah.
It's not about developing talent and hoping you can sell it. It's like, no, if you're going to invest $5, $6, $7, $10 million in your academy, you better be developing talent you can sell, or you're wasting your money.
Right.
The winning has to be right next to it. It's not in a separate room. It's not separate. It's got to be right next to it. You have to develop talent that is good enough to be sold and good enough to win now. You have to do both. It's not an either or. I think at times that conversation in this country has been winning or development. It's got to go hand in hand. Now, Dallas is going to have more opportunities for a young player to play more minutes because they're not going to go spend bigger on a transfer for a player from outside the system to play those minutes. That can help young players. But if you don't win, and if you're an FC Dallas, this is part of the issue with them in terms of that revenue. If you don't win, you're not going to have people come out to watch. Right. You don't have people come out to watch, you don't have more revenue to work with. Adam says Dallas could still develop talent around the right big money designated player like Atlanta. I agree. I don't think they would spend as much as Atlanta, but they can get to that point that, and this is where I've always been that I want to see the league get to, where you have teams like a Dallas, like a Philadelphia, that are not going to spend as much on a bunch of players. They're going to spend more on academy, and they're going to produce players, and then let's say you have a crop that comes through and you're missing a number 6. You just haven't had that defensive midfielder come through. Go buy one and go spend the money to do it effectively, because you're not being asked as that technical director to go buy 5 players. You're being asked to go buy the right 1 player to make the group better. Because every club in the world, Barcelona, they had to bring in guys to supplement what they developed in their heyday. Manchester United had to go out and buy a Roy Keane and bring him in because they didn't have a Roy Keane in-house. That's where I want to see them spend. It might not be the big money designated player, but you have to be willing to spend to put it over the top. Because no club can develop the perfect 11 all the way through their academy and have everybody be identified and nailed from 12 years old and nothing happens to derail it. That's impossible. So you have to be willing to spend to supplement the group. And that's where I want to see Dallas get to. If they don't spend $15 million on a transfer, that's okay. but be willing to commit the resources when it comes.
Right. No, right there with you. Let's see. On Twitter, a couple of different things. CONMEBOL set to announce the return of the Libertadores for September 15th, the return of the Copa Sudamericana on October 27, and the return of World Cup qualifiers in October, according to Roberto Rojas.
We will see. They have pushed back the September World Cup qualifiers. They are requesting a World Cup qualifier window in January, which would throw European leagues into some chaos because we see it every January when the African Cup of Nations is in that window and players have to leave their teams because teams don't stop for that window typically. They might have to in this, in an already compressed schedule, or they're going to have to play without some of their South American players, and that's going to create some issues. So keep an eye on that. That's been requested by CONMEBOL to FIFA, and we'll see how it comes.
And Marshall Voigt likes the new logo on Twitch, by the way.
That's thanks to Chris Ashley. You can go buy a shirt with that on it. You can buy a sticker with that on it. You can buy a fanny pack with that on it if you want.
And how can you do that, Jason?
You go to teespring.com/soccer-down-here or soccerdownhere.net and follow the link. You can get it in black, a black T-shirt. You can get it in a dark gray, and you can get it in red. There are women's shirts available as well. There are tank tops available as well, and stickers and fanny packs. So, yeah, have at it. Thanks, Chris Ashley.
Yes, thanks, Chris Ashley. We have the Champions League quarterfinals set, in addition to everything else that's going on. That draw was this morning.
So,
and speaking of Manchester City, that we'll find out their fate very early Monday morning our time.
Yes, so our show on Monday will know what Manchester City's ban or not ban, which according to some people, they're not going to have any penalty for financial fair play breaches, which I find crazy, unless it's a technicality kind of thing that they're getting off on. They did hire a lot of good lawyers, so maybe it's possible. We'll see about that one.
Yep.
But that's going to come out. That's going to come out Monday morning, 10:30 local time, Manchester. So, what, 4:30, 5:30 our time?
5:30 our time.
Okay, so we'll talk about it in the morning on Monday. The Champions League quarterfinals. You still have round of 16 games to finish it off, but the quarterfinals. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to have one of potentially PSG, Atalanta, RB Leipzig, and who was the other one? One of those four are going to be in the final, which is pretty wild. Like, it got stacked on one side, big time. The other side, look, I mean, it could be Atalanta in the Champions League final. It could be RB Leipzig, although they won't have Timo Werner, so I think that's less likely, but who knows? It could be PSG finally. But they haven't played in who knows how long.
They get Atalanta in the quarterfinals.
It's going to be craziness. So Champions League draw was interesting. That was on CBS Sports Network this morning. They're going to have everything going with that on the CBS platforms. They have the rights to it now. It looks like one Atletico. Thank you. I knew there was one more that I was like, that could be interesting. Then Atletico's the favorite there, but Atalanta's playing really, really well. I'm going to fire through this really quick because I got to hop on 92.9 here in a couple of minutes with Dukes and Bell, except it's not Dukes, it's Willie P today. So, Ricky Ricardo, intrigued to see this fluid forward situation with Pitti, Barco, Osetu, and Castro. Going to be looking like Cerebrus with an extra head, hopefully. Okay, I like it. I want to see it too. I don't know if all four of them are going to be there. I think it's going to be three of them, and I don't know. Sounds like it's going to be Pitti, Barco, and Castro from the words we're hearing, but I don't know. I would have thought Josetu would have factored into that, but maybe he's going to factor into the holding midfield, which would mean one of Remedi and Heinemann are going to sit, and both have looked good in the early stages this season. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. I'm really intrigued to see how it looks against the Red Bulls press or how much they press. And that's I'm coming back more and more to I think they're going to pick their spots. I don't think they're going to press like they usually do. Atlanta will have opportunities to build up play against the Red Bulls like we really haven't seen before. So I'm fascinated to see what that looks like. YouTube says the rumblings are simply that Man City's money spends just as well as anyone else. More income for the smaller leagues that populate the group stage of the UEFA Champions League. I don't know if I'd buy that. I'll tell you why before we go. If it's about, well, Manchester City's got a bunch of money and they're a big popular club that draws really well and that's going to help the teams in the group stage, they haven't really drawn well for Champions League, and I don't think people have really bought into it in Manchester because it's a smaller fan base. Not knocking Man City. It's a smaller fan base. Especially if you look at, who is fighting it out for the 5th spot right now in the Premier League that would be there in place of Manchester City. Manchester United's won. Who's going to draw more for Champions League games in the group stage? Manchester United. Easily. It's not even close. Who else is in that conversation?
Well, Leicester's 4th, but they're only a point ahead of Manchester United.
Okay, so that's 4 and 5, but that would mean Manchester United right now would be the one. Who's in 6th?
Wolves by a point over Sheffield United, and then Arsenal is at 50. Tottenham and Burnley are at 49.
Arsenal ain't going into the Champions League.
So you've got 5 teams within 3 points of each other from 6 to 10.
I don't think it's about that. I think if they get off, it could be about their money. It's definitely going to be about their money in terms of the lawyers that they're paying. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be more about FIFA doesn't want to have them not continue to spend the money that they are. That's where I come back to, is they don't want to see this ownership group pull back. So I don't know. If you have rules, you got to follow them, and you got to enforce them. And if you don't, then they don't really mean anything, do they? And FIFA, or UEFA is a better one here, sorry. UEFA has backed off of some of these penalties in the past. This would be a huge back off. I think there's probably somewhere in between getting off scot-free and being banned from the Champions League for a couple of years. And I would assume that they try to find that. And it's not UEFA making the decision. It's CAS who's going to rule on it, so they are an independent group. I think this whole technicality thing is where they're going to find it. They're going to find a loophole, and they're going to find something, and they're going to exploit it, and CAS is going to say, yeah, by the letter of the law, they shouldn't be suspended. Mm-hmm. And then we'll see if UEFA decides to fight it or go along with what CAS says. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. We'll have that on Monday. We'll be back in the morning to talk about Atlanta and Red Bulls in depth. That's going to be at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll be back at 7 o'clock tonight. Kelly Francis will be in charge for the run-up with John. I'll be on, I think, for a little bit. Potentially Nick and Jarrett, although they're both waffling like they like to waffle sometimes. So we'll see if we can get them to stop waffling, and we'll see if we can get them into it.
So the run-up is trying not to be the Waffle House, is what you're saying.
Something like that, yes. We will do our best, but that'll be at 7 o'clock tonight on all your usual platforms. So thanks for finding us. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for being flexible on our power hours and weird time slots right now. Talk to y'all in a little bit. Mucho platiel.
Mucho platiel.